Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Zhang. Welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest, Dr. Amy Vertrees, who is a board-certified general surgeon, Army veteran, author, and founder of the Boss Business of Surgery series. Dr. Amy and I actually did our coach certification training together at the Life Coach School. Dr. Amy is the founder of Columbia Surgical Partners, a private practice general surgery group. As many of us have come to realize, there is so much we didn't learn in our medical training that we wish we had. She created the Boss Business of Surgery series to fill in the gaps and has used everything she learned to become a successful private practice general surgeon. We're going to talk more today about private practice and the money scarcity that can come with private practice. Dr. Amy, say hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I know that we've been together for a few years now, just like commingling and talking about our journeys and things like that, about how our careers are evolving and our coaching is evolving and things like that. So thank you so much for inviting me on today. This has been really great.
Yeah, we were chatting before we started recording and we just kept chatting. And I was like,
we should record.
Yeah, we need to start recording. So yes, private practice. One of the things that I think brings up about a lot of money scarcity is lack of certainty, right? Like we think we know what's going to happen, but then when things don't go that way, that's when scarcity seems to come up. And then of course, in private practice, you've got a lot more ups and downs as opposed to when you're an employed physician, you're kind of relying on a salary.
That's exactly it. That was probably the most surprising aspect of private practice. There was so much to starting a practice and things you don't know. And I really embraced the idea of, I'm just going to try to make as few mistakes as possible, which let me make mistakes. And I was able to grow the practice and we're doing really well. We've expanded now and have 3 surgeons, a nurse practitioner, and we're expanding to multiple locations now. So that one just blows my mind because I thought I was just going to start this cute little solo thing. I wanted to do something different and really challenge myself. And, I reached out to you because I said, honestly, the biggest challenge I have is money mindset. And I was never really someone who was worried about money because I always felt like I could make it. But the variations of it really helped me understand a lot of my own money drama that I didn't even know was there.
So let's dig into that a little deeper. What kind of money drama did you find going on in your head?
Oh gosh. Well, one is that if anyone's trying to follow the numbers that are written anywhere, it's all magical numbers. So the first challenge is realizing that the numbers don't make any sense to anybody until you realize that they're bloating a lot of these numbers so it looks different or good. It's almost like the magician hand trick. My very first month, I actually had $90,000 in charges. And I thought, well, this is amazing. This was my first month, and I really had the idea I was going to be profitable from day one. And I was. And so I had this idea that the charges meant what the collections were going to be. And what I found is that in our particular system, that those charges, you'll be lucky to get 22%, 22 to 24% of these magical charges or what you would expect to get in collections. So the first instance was just recognizing there's funny math all over the place. So if you can't figure out the numbers, you're not alone. So it was challenged my idea that it was going to be logical and I was going to be able to figure it out immediately. And that was really honestly the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I think we know that in medicine, or what we don't know in medicine, because when I'm ordering a test on a patient, I don't know how much it's going to cost them. I don't know what their deductible is. It depends on so many different things. And I, as a patient, I remember I actually called my insurance company, checked that it was covered, gave the CPT code, gave the ICD-10 codes, and was told it was covered. And I was thinking, okay, like if I had to pay a copay, I don't know. I just wasn't thinking it would be that much. And then, yes, it was covered, but I still ended up paying like over $300. And I was like, what?
What is going on? Yeah, and that's the hard part. I asked myself an interesting question. I was like, I wonder how much it costs to do a lap chole. And someone asked me, and I was like, I don't know. No one knows. Like if you ask anybody how much your lap chole is going to take, no one knows. It's variable. My husband gets back injections every quarter, and he has for the last 5 years. Same surgeon, same place. same insurance, and it's been different every single time. I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, I certainly remember when I was in private practice, the first time I was looking at the collections and again, like charges and collections, and I was like, holy cow. Like,
Yeah.
and what that difference, like what percentage of collections you get for charges, depending on what the patient's insurance is, can also really vary.
And there's the magician hand trick that the patients get too, because we get these, benefits statement and like we your doctor's visit costs $600. And I'm like, what? I get like 80 to 120. I'm just
Right.
making up numbers. But so one of the patients said, well, aren't you doing well for yourself? I'm like, what are you talking about? That money doesn't come to me. It's all magical numbers. So it also, I think, is another wedge that makes us look bad in the system and makes it look like we're doing so well, where really, honestly, it's the magician behind the corner who's, putting the coins in the pocket. So I definitely think that the whole system itself is built with such nonsense and nonsensical numbers that it's hard for anyone to understand what's actually going on. So how on earth could you work on your money mindset when you don't even know what you're dealing with?
Yeah, that's so true. I do think about when I look at an explanation of benefits. And as a physician, I kind of know the other end. But yeah, as a patient, they're probably thinking like, wow, doctors get paid so much. And it's like, no, we get pennies of that.
Yeah. And that's been really interesting to discover that. So then eventually I got a feeling for how much things would take. So I can now usually figure out how busy I am and how many cases I have, and I can estimate what that month is going to do. But even then, because there's such a delay in reimbursement, so for private practice, you get with whatever you bring in. So you'll do your charges and they'll do lots of things in between, and then you'll get paid anywhere from 60 to 90 days afterwards, things like that. So I'll have a great month where I'm working ton and I'm doing a lot of cases. And I'm thinking my next paycheck, which comes every month, it comes on a spreadsheet. And I thought, I'm going to do really great. And then I look at the number and I'm so disappointed. But it's because, like, 2 months ago, I had, a week off or something like that. And there a time when other people were taking vacations, so overall was slower. So you can't even necessarily gauge the amount that you're making based on the work that you're doing too. So that's another way that you have to train your mind not to look at that number and make it mean anything. And it wasn't like the day-to-day numbers or even the monthly numbers that I had to start paying attention to. I had to step back and look at the picture as a whole and say, is my ratio of collections to billing or the charges staying stable? And is my work, like the RVUs, is really helpful so I can have the same language to talk to myself and other people about, like, how am I compared to another general surgeon in the area and how much am I making per RVU, which gives me some idea. So I had to basically recreate determining how successful the business actually was because the numbers weren't really telling me. My effort wasn't really telling me because they didn't match. So it was definitely a lot of trying to figure out what is the best way to communicate how the business was actually doing in a way that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the vacation because I know some private practice doctors who find it really hard to take vacation because they're paying their staff and they're paying overhead while they're on vacation. So I've heard of surgeons who will send their spouse and kids on vacation and they'll stay back and work, or they'll only go for part of the vacation because of needing to cover that overhead.
It is, and it can become like a mental trap for you 100% because, like for me, my bills are 5 figures. So if I don't work for like 2 weeks a month or something like that, if I take a decent amount like this month, I have to brace myself the fact that it's really going to hurt for a bit. And it's the lack of the money coming in. Could I afford it? Yes. Was I expecting it? Of course. Did I plan for it? Yes. But still, there's something really strange about looking at that number going, oh my gosh, it's all terrible. So what you want to do is just try to avoid the discomfort of looking at a number that you could predict is going to be down. So it's not the number that matters, it's the meaning that you have behind the difference in number. And that causes the most trauma is seeing like each month is a little bit different and you can't 100% predict what it's going to look like.
What about just embracing discomfort, knowing like the number's going to go up, the number's going to go down, but I'm always going to be fine?
That took it still takes some time. So I've been doing this now for 4 years. And what I started learning was I had to step back and look at the whole thing. So I would look at how much I made for an entire year. And then I realized over the last couple of years, I could predict overall the annual amount. So that part was easier, but still each month, like I pay my malpractice all at once. So that month in June is always lower. So now I can kind of predict, all right, brace myself, it's going to be a little bit, rougher. But I'm also realizing that it doesn't affect me as much. And I think it doesn't affect me as much because I started to realize it's an emotional reaction. It is not a logical one because I'm not going to starve. I was in the military. I didn't have student loans. I'm pretty good with money. I have a lot of investments and real estate and a side business, and all of these things are really how I adapted to the mental drama that happens, is to have to constantly remind myself that I'm fine because the numbers logically are okay. And in fact, one of the things that really struck me is when I started hiring people, just how little we pay people. Like there are people getting by on $18 to $20 an hour, and I pay more than the people in the area. So for me to say, like, how could I really have this much drama when clearly I'm not in danger of starving? And I'm hiring people who, like a small thing like a large doctor bill, can, set them into a financial spiral that's real. And this is in my mind. So that's when I started realizing that it is my mental drama about the money that's the problem, not the actual number itself, because clearly I can get by. And that's really where I had to do a lot of my mind work, is to remind myself this is an emotional reaction and it's okay to feel discomfort, but nothing is actually harming me right now.
Yeah, that's an important thing to always remember is that the worst thing that can happen is actually just how you feel, and no feeling is going to kill you.
Yeah, but it feels terrible. And also, it can, if you're not conscious of it, even if you are conscious of it, how does that affect how you act? And just like you mentioned, it's like the hesitancy to take a vacation, or, I didn't go to conferences because conferences were extraordinarily expensive for not just the flights and the hotel, but also just the time away. The last 2 years now, I started realizing how important they were for me to go to for professional development stuff. I'm actually investing in myself. I'm allowing myself to not have as much drama because I'm willing to pay a fair amount to invest in myself, and conferences are one of those things. But it is a sit down, let's talk about this with myself. We're not going to freak out. It's going to be lower. Just don't even look if it's going to bother you. Really having the confidence that if whatever money I make is an investment and I'm going to make it back, and even if it's a loss this month, I could easily make it up in other ways too. So that part is really just having a constant dialogue with yourself, and letting the fears be heard, because sometimes, especially this day and age, it is really hard. The financial landscape is very difficult. When we have decreased reimbursements but remarkably high expenses, those expenses started increasing a lot, but the income and the reimbursement went down, or like, what is going on here? So there's also, like, on a bigger picture of saying, like, does anybody know how to do this? Does anyone really have any understanding of the finances of a private practice? And so it's been really interesting to watch my own mental drama and how I've managed it,
Yeah.
and debatably well.
Well, early on, you said that you decided that you were going to be profitable at your private practice from day one.
Yes.
So, how did you even set that into motion? What were all the preparation you did in order to have enough patients coming in to potentially be profitable from the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I look back in time at myself, and I knew what I was thinking. I mean, it was a little bit fear-based, but it was also ego-based, and really wanted to challenge myself. It's that competitiveness that I have in myself. So the whole venture helped me understand myself on a better level, but I wanted to succeed. And that was really the driver behind that. And so the mechanisms behind that was I was employed and I stayed in the same area. And my non-compete didn't really apply because I still bring patients to the hospital. In fact, the hospital system was much better off by me offloading the overhead of the clinic expenses to myself. initially my medical group that I left gave me a hard time and saying that they were treating me as if I was leaving the area. And I actually had to go to the CEO of the hospital and say, I'm not leaving in the area. I'm not going to abandon anyone. I'm literally locking this door and unlocking that one. So they allowed me to still see new patients up to the end. Otherwise, they were going to try to stop 6 weeks before I closed the doors. And I started my private practice actually on my phone. So I used the Doximity free fax and the Spruce phone app. So in that time frame, if you called Dr. Vertrees' office, I you were actually speaking to me as I'm like, sure, would you like to see Dr. Vertrees is available? It was kind of fun to really work all that system. I mean, I really went too much too soon because it about broke me, but I did what I said I was going to do. And that's honestly been the success and the joy of private practice is just to see what you're capable of. And that part, when you realize that that's the success and not the monetary success, it's the really stretching yourself and challenging yourself and really just seeing like, dang, I did lock that door and unlock that one and built a building or had the building renovated and had profitable from the very first month that we did. And so, I could look back and say, I really like who that person was who did all that. So it was more than just the money, but the money was a sign of it. And I guess that's maybe my rambling point of that is that I wanted to have tangible success. And it's not just the money, it's the other success. And when I coach other people about things like private practice, I try to remind them that is where the joy and the victory is too. And when you make it also related to money and money as a sign, that's when these ups and downs can cause the most internal drama.
So your practice was profitable from the first month. Profitable meaning that obviously it was covering all the expenses. But when were you able to start actually drawing a salary?
Oh, they would come and go. So I like the collections would there. So I had the charges the first month, and I think I was probably like maybe 2 or 3 months negative, but then it really went high beyond that too. So the first year I made close to what I made as an employed physician. So that part was really remarkable and probably honestly more because I bought the building. We had the offsetting of taxes. And so one thing I also started to understand was to make the money at the end. It's not just the income that you get, it's maximize your income, minimizing your expenses, and minimizing your tax burden. And by starting this with the building that I owned and things like that, I had someone that came with me, so I got rent from them and the depreciation of the building and stuff too. So I really actually underestimated how much I was going to make with all these other things that went along with it.
Yeah, it's true. There's so many tax benefits from being a business owner and being and having a business that you just don't have when you have W-2 income only.
Yeah. And when you look at that, like my monthly spreadsheet, I'll look at this number and then you'll multiply that by 12. I'm like, oh no. And then, that'll be really high and you multiply by 12 and you're like, yes. And then you start to realize like that number is just only one piece of it. And so I encouraged like my other partners too. I said, there are a couple things that'll keep you sane. It'll go up and down. Is just remind yourself, one, what you're getting out of this beyond the money that you're getting. And the second is make sure you have other things that can keep your mind settled and also keep it stable. Do you have a side business? Do you have real estate? Are you maximizing all the taxable things that you do? And not to forget about things like we would host students where we would get income, we would get call for or pay for call, things like that. And so really looking at the numbers all together rather than just one in isolation. So it's really a great education and looking at all of your finances as a whole that are the most challenging.
And when you decided to start the private practice, did you kind of put aside a larger emergency fund or nest egg to kind of support yourself until you knew that your new practice could support you?
Oh, I think I'm glad you brought that up because the decision to start the practice was really based on a lot of the work I was already doing just in money mindset in general. And I started realizing like when you stop the mind drama of like, I'm not going to work or I'm not going to make money, and you start looking realistically, I was like, I could actually not work for a year. Like looking at the income, not income, the amount that I had in savings and liquid assets.
Assets.
I was like, I could actually not work for an entire year. So that allowed me to take some chances. So one thing was this understanding that I had all these assets and we would be fine, that we had enough in emergency funds allowed me to be willing to take the chance. And I also let myself think about failing. Like if this doesn't work, I mean, I'll just get a job. I'm still a surgeon. I'd already had all of the things that I needed to be successful, which was all the years that I worked to be have all this income potential. So when I started realizing the income potential was me and not the job, that the ability for me to make money was based on my skill and what I had already done and my willingness to take chances and support myself along the way and to be my own safety net, that's allowed me to make a lot more or take a lot more chances than I would have otherwise.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up of realizing that because of the assets you had, how long you could actually go without actually needing additional income. And that's why I really stress to people to really work a little bit towards your finances. And, I say that there are different levels of financial independence. And the first level is just survival FI. When you have enough financial income assets, money coming off your assets, passive income, what have you, that your mortgage is going to get paid, you'll have food on the table. Yeah, maybe you can't take vacation during that time period, but all your basic needs are met. So if you ever find yourself in a situation that you just find unbearable, like you don't have to bear it. You can walk away and you have the time to actually figure out what you want to be doing.
I think the most interesting thing I heard was from Brooke Castillo and says, like, where do you make money? It's like you make money from your mind. And we have already created all this income potential. The income that we get is not because an employer gives us money. The income that we make is because we did the work to become employable. We've already done the work to get this. So therefore, we are the ones that generate the income, and we also are the ones that generate the circumstances that we get the income. So it really freed my mind thinking that I don't have to have a job to have income because I know that I will find a way to make it because of who I am and what I'm capable of and all the things that I've already done.
Yeah, and I do think there are so many more options for physicians now. Like if you do walk away from your job, you could just pick up some locums work and do enough to make ends meet and have time to figure out what the next step is, what you want to do.
In fact, I think the more we think about this and realize what we're capable of, we we're starting to wonder, why are we putting up with these terrible jobs? Like, who's going to take care of us now? Because we're all going to walk away because we can.
Well, actually, I tell a lot of people now, I tell a lot of people that if you're going to want to see a physician in the not so far future, you're going to end up paying cash to see somebody because physicians aren't going to keep putting up with the way insurance companies are treating us, with the way hospitals are treating us. And yeah, people will do that for a little bit after their training until they've paid off their loans, and then they're going to figure out something else.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of just surprising all of this. And I think, honestly, being private practice, you pay a lot more attention to different things. And you start to see just how broken the system really is, about how rigged it is and how it's geared against us. For, example, like I did a big case in February and I did it with a plastic surgeon. So we submitted our charges and they have it, they like, okay, we want more documentation. Great. Sent them back, another like couple weeks. And then we get a status and like, oh, well, now we've requested more documentation from the plastic surgeon. So, and then we submit it back. And then, this has been since February. We still haven't gotten paid yet. And, this is me watching it happen. Now, these bigger systems, when there's all these people along the way, all it takes is for someone not to see that, well, we want this more documentation, like, oh, well, you didn't submit it, so we won't pay. And, to see this happening on a big scale where the revenue cycle is based on the weakest link of the cycle, just, it helps me think like, not just is it ridiculous for the physicians, but the whole system is just built on just, I don't even know how it's all surviving, honestly.
Yeah, I really don't know how a lot of the hospitals survive. When I was working for one of the hospitals, I would put in a premium lens and my patient would be like, I've been trying to pay for the premium lens, but like there's no one who can collect on my credit card. And I tell them like, you know what, it's their problem. And frankly, I didn't get any kind of compensation for the premium lens. So why am I going to try to figure out ways that the hospital is going to get that money, right? Like they need to figure out a system to do that.
Yeah, I do worry like with these big systems too, just how, I don't know, how much stuff gets dropped. And it makes me think of the system stability as a whole. So I do worry about, the doctors not putting up with it and then the systems being lacking their funds because of all the, shenanigans that happen. And I just like, gosh, I don't know if this is going to be fixed or if this is just the way it's always been and now I just see it.
No, I definitely think that there's been a lot of progression and changes because there was a time where hospitals didn't employ physicians. Hospital wooed physicians to come and bring cases to their hospital. And that's when you had like nice physician lounges where there would be like actual good food in there. And now hospitals are employing physicians and trying to control them, but in a way that eventually there's going to be a revolt for sure.
Yeah, actually had one of our hospital leaders, I was talking to him and he's involved with a lot of these organizations for hospitals. And he said that the hospitals don't want private practices because they said that, oh gosh, what was his exact wording? That we would be basically uncontrollable. But it was in a way of saying like they would be autonomous in like a bad way, meaning that we wouldn't be doing standard of care and things like that too, that we would be basically, messing up and things like that too. And I was like, that sounds interesting, but that's not necessarily what I see. I was like, I didn't become private practice for this. I became private practice so I could determine what my own experience of how I use my skills or and how I serve my patients and not being told exactly how to take care of them, but in a way that I could because I know how to take care of patients, not because the system knows better and I would just not do what the system says, which is the system being better. It was a really interesting conversation. I was like, do people really think that I'm just become private practice so I could just not do good patient care? It's like exactly the opposite.
I know, I think that's a crazy thought because I mean, physicians want to treat their patients well. Otherwise, physicians are smart people and they could easily have gone to corporate. I mean, if money was the only reason to be a doctor, like there are easier ways to make more money, to be honest.
Yeah, and much sooner without giving away our youth for it.
Right. And if a physician who has a private practice really isn't treating patients well, eventually that's going to bite them back and they're not going to have patients, right?
Yeah,
So it doesn't make any sense.
it was a weird conversation. It's funny. I found myself in an interesting trap that we find ourselves because you still act like an employee, and I think that's the main problem that a lot of people have. Their jump from being an employee to a private practice is that you still have the employee mindset, because that's one thing that we learn over time is the employee mindset. Like I'm not in control of my career and my progression and things like that. And I fell for it too. I mean, I've been in private practice for 4 years, and we had a bit of an issue with something the hospital was doing that was really impacting our practice. And it suddenly occurred to me, I was like, wait a minute, I could go to a different hospital. And that freedom, I was like, this is what it's for. It's that, they were not going to allow us to practice it in a way that would really help me. So I can actually go to this system and see if they'll help. And so our ability to be flexible and independent and recognize that we are the ones bringing the skill and the talent for patient care was just something that I didn't even realize I was still thinking like someone who worked for someone and had loyalty to someone, that you didn't have to necessarily hold on to that. And not to be disloyal, just meaning that I don't have to be treated in a way that I don't want, that's not serving the practice. I can now think from the practice perspective, and if this hospital doesn't serve me, then this hospital may. So that mind shift was really interesting to see how I was falling for that trap. And I think that's just how ingrained it is.
Yeah, and I think our medical training is more ingrained to build employees and for people not to think about their own autonomy. As a medical student, as a resident, it's kind of do what you're told type of situation.
Yeah.
And at some point being realized, wait, I get to think about this and do and practice the way that I want to practice. And that really doesn't actually come out until you're an attending. And so if you're attending at a hospital where they're really kind of telling you this is the way you do things, it's easy to continue in that mindset of like, oh yeah, I was told what to do when I was a med student. I was told what to do as a resident. I was told what to do as a fellow. So I'll just
Yeah.
keep doing what I'm told what to do.
Yeah. And it's so ingrained that you don't even notice it until you step back and say, I can actually determine things. Who knew?
One other thing I want to ask about that I was thinking about earlier was, is there any way to kind of think about forward income and projections?
Oh, like anticipating how much you'll make?
Yeah, so that you can, so when you have that low month, you're like, okay, that was from 2 months ago, but you were talking about how there's that 60 to 90-day lag. So there really should be some measure of kind of forward projections as time is going.
Oh yeah, for sure. And basically how I've done it is I have a routine. So I have clinic 2 days a week. I'm a nurse practitioner, so it's basically doubling the clinic. I see like the surgery center one day and the main OR that day, and I built in Wednesdays off. So I went down to 0.8 FTE, but I still see the same amount. And I can see like when a clinic is busy, if my clinic is full, usually by the end of the day, if I'm like totally spent, I'm like that I probably likely collected or will be billing enough to keep things okay. I noticed like if my cases are, if I'm doing at least, three, typically closer to six cases a day, then I'm probably going to be making that and looking at the case mixes. So I could tell if like I have a day of like only three cases and they're smaller cases, that's probably going to be a lower day. And then if I, was on call and got several operative consults and things like that, or a couple big cases, then I could usually in my mind estimate because I've been very careful to pay attention to how much I make each month. Our system now allows me to look at these. So I typically do them a month at a time and I check myself. So I can usually estimate fairly accurately how much I'm going to make that month because the expenses are about the same now. And my surgery schedule and the cases that I do are about the same now. So it's gotten a little bit more stable, but I can usually predict just like this month's gonna be rough when I look at it because I was gone for a few days and I'm gonna be gone for almost a week. So I can already start to just anticipate this. So then when I see it, it'll still be disappointing, but at least I will have braced myself. And now it's like like a small disappointment rather than devastation kind of thing.
And realistically, if you think of like, yes, you have a sense of how much you're bringing in by based on how much work. If you realize like, oh, I'm really not probably bringing in enough, you could ramp up and figure out ways to kind of bring in more.
And I see that. And in fact, I talk about this in my coaching group, and we're talking about it tonight called clinic math. And clinic math is you telling yourself the truth about what you're actually doing, the number of patients that you're actually seeing, the number of spaces you have for them. And I see this especially true for the new attending. They come in, they're like, I'm not getting that many patients. It's like, yes, but your slots are now like 45 minutes. So there's only a certain number of spots that you have. And if you only have it on one day, you're just hoping that the patients are going to come in that day, or you have no shows, and especially if you're new to the area. So you have to anticipate, like, they're not going to be able to see as many as me, who has like 15-minute spots. It's probably 30-minute spots. So, you have to look at the actual math. How many patients am I seeing? How many patients do I need to see? And when you see that number dropping off, okay, I need to do more marketing efforts. I need to figure out a different way. And we were talking about this before we started recording is when you're disappointed in the result, you have to do an action audit. What am I actually doing? Have I been talking to my primary care physicians? Have I been reaching out? Have I looked and saw, like, is there a person who used to refer to me a lot, not referring as much? So you always have to look at the actions and inactions that you're doing because you can generate these results. It's possible. You just have to figure out what is the action that I need to do it, and how do I need to think and feel to do that action. And doing an action audit is saying, well, yeah, I'm not really seeing much, but I haven't really reached out to people lately because I've been so busy. It's going to be a central lag. And if I do reach out and then the numbers go up, you prove it to yourself. So when you're in control of it, you have to realize you're actually in control of it, which means that the results, you are actually generating these yourself. So you have to be able to check in and be honest with yourself. What have I been doing or not doing that is contributing to the number of things that I'm seeing?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that are actually under our control that we don't think are, but we can take actions to have a lot more control over the situation.
Yeah. And the nice thing about private practice, well, the nice and the tough thing is that when I'm like hearing people saying, well, there aren't people in my clinic, I'm like, yeah, what are you doing? Or what are you not doing? Like, well, I mean, they're just supposed to come. Someone else is supposed to do it. I'm like, you know who that someone else is?
Right.
So that's the hard part because when you leave residency where you're in established clinics and there's an unlimited amount of people, you think that's how clinic works, and it's not. And it's if you feed it, it will grow, but you have to constantly feed it. And sometimes you've done so well that it just, works on its own. Like like crops come up every year, you fed it well, but it still requires some attention. You still get some disease thing to wipe your crop out. So you always have to be on the lookout for what you can do and what innovative solution you can do. And a lot of times it's just a simple action that you haven't had to do. So, realizing complete ownership, you are the one generating your results is revealing.
Yeah. The other thing I realize is you've been saying that you've been in private practice for 4 years and it's 2024, which means you basically started your private practice either during or before the pandemic.
Yes. Well, that seemed like a perfect time to do that, didn't it? It actually, it's surprising. There are a couple things that are surprising. I just ran all my numbers. I've been here in the area for 7 years. My RVUs didn't change. Even in COVID, it didn't change, but my case mix changed a little bit. So I did less hernias there, but I still did the same number of cases. It's been interesting to see how consistent all this was, even in COVID. So, as far as like the general surgeon in COVID, we were not hurt that much. I did a whole lot more trigs. I remember doing like 11 in 2 weeks, but I didn't do as many elective things like hernias. But they still let us do some of our cancer patients and things like that. So, my case volume actually did not suffer in the time of COVID.
Yeah, whereas I was not in the OR for, I think, 6 weeks, except for one cancer case, one melanoma case.
Yeah, then my clinic was down a little bit too. But even then, that was a nice thing about being in my own building. We could still, see some people too. So
Yeah, I was down to clinic like once a week, and it was only patients who needed to be seen. So if
yeah.
I was not on call 24/7, I would have actually they had physicians take all their PTO and vacation time and then furloughed them.
And that's a really great lesson. I think the one thing about COVID and the time and even with private practice is that when you do have a lull and something, drastic happens like a global pandemic, is, what is your backup? And having multiple streams that could run is helpful. But also recognizing like what do we make money for? I mean, like, what's the point? Which is ironic, where you're like, I work really hard to make money so I can have free time. And in the time of COVID, like I couldn't work really hard and I had lots of time and I just eliminated the money component of it. And I added drama to it just for fun. But it is just so funny when I ask my own group too, I was like, what is money for? And we're like, money's for security. Money's for buying your free time. Money's for traveling. When you realize it's like we're working so hard, giving up our time and our effort and our time to travel to make money to do this, that maybe we don't need the middleman. And I think the one thing that we could have done or that we did in COVID, where some people did, was to recognize that time is a valuable commodity, is almost, I think would say more important than money. Money still runs a lot of our jobs and or runs our lives and makes it a little bit easier. But in the end, we usually are using money, giving up something to make money to get it.
Yeah, no, time is definitely more valuable than money because you can't get more time. You have the time you have. You can kind of buy back your time and by paying someone to do something so you don't have to do it. So now you have time to do something else. But
Yeah.
I mean, time flows and there's no gaining back more time and no one knows how much time they have left on this earth. So time is definitely more valuable than money. And I think that's something I think I took to heart in COVID as well was, yeah, like, what do I really want to be spending my time? I love to travel and that means that takes time to travel. And yes, it takes some money to travel, but I'm much happier part-time now. Now I have the time to actually travel. And if I were working more, I would have more money, but I wouldn't actually have the time to do what I want to do with that money.
Exactly. Oh, and one last thing that I learned about money too is I was in the army for 17 years and I never actually thought about how much I made because our salary was determined by Congress everyone's getting the same amount. And then you would get bonuses or whatever based on your time in service and also whatever specialty you're in. So general surgeons got different amounts than other people. So I never actually really thought about how much I made because it was the same. In fact, if you asked me like how much I made each year, I was like, I don't know, it's just what everybody else did. But I didn't think about it as much. And so that's where I think the variations really I realized the variations are what caused the drama, not the money itself.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on and being so open about everything that you've gone through with your private practice. Tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to learn more about you, more about the Boss Business of Surgery series.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much again for having me. I'm so just amazed at your journey. And, we started at the same time together. And it's just so great to see how we both evolved and really followed our passion and our interest. And this, truly has become like a purpose-driven mission because the private practice lessons I've learned really feed the Boss Business of Surgery series, which is a podcast called the Boss Business of Surgery series, which is lessons not taught in residency, all those things that I wish that I had learned that I'm now learning. And I have the private practice where I can put these lessons in action. I can learn them and I can experiment with them and I can make mistakes and I can learn how to do things. And then I could turn it into a podcast episodes. And then I meet all these other people and allow them to share their stories and stuff, which, having you on as well, of course.
Yeah.
And then I also do coaching one-on-one and group coaching, and all of that can be found at bosssurgery.com. And I did write a book called Become the Boss MD, Success Beyond Residency, where I distilled a lot of the lessons that I've learned into a fictitious surgeon's journey about getting a job, being in the job, and then evolving beyond that to really highlight some of the changes that we see in our career. Because a lot of times we see these changes in career and think it's something, a big deal and a problem, but it's really not. So bosssurgery.com is the place to find me. I have a Facebook group called Become the Boss MD, and Instagram on Become the Boss MD. And otherwise, those are probably the easiest places to find me.
And I will have all that information in the show notes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for being on. And thanks to our listeners for being listeners of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. I'll be back next week with another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.